So this is Spooky Readers Top 5, and this is my first episode. I hope it's not the last, but it's the first one. And my first guests are Nichi from darkbetweenpages and the author Felix Tomorrow from How to Make a Monster. You guys know that I reviewed that book, so you know about it. So this is going to be very exciting. The theme is monsters. So we're just going to be talking about our top 5 monsters, human or beast or whatever in between. And we're just going to discuss those things. So before we begin, though, I do have a question for both of you, which is, I'll start with Nichi, which is, what makes a monster for you?
Oh gosh, what makes a monster for me would just be anything that's kind of out of this world, but at the same time, something that may be realistic, something that may be like a real life horror, whether it be, a serial killer or whether it be somebody with horns or a tail. To me, there's so many different types of monsters out there. And I'd like to say a monster is something that truly, truly scares me. A monster is something that I'm just obsessed with, that I find so interesting and that I can't help but want to research about or find out more about them or just keep reading whatever I'm reading.
And Felix, what about you?
My definition of a monster is a bit more simple. I think it's basically any person or anything that causes harm or causes pain, whether intentionally or through perpetual reckless behavior. Mm-hmm. That's basically it for me. So that could fall into the realm of the supernatural, or it could just be humans that go around doing crappy things and wind up hurting people.
Yeah, that's a good aspect, because I think, the monster is definitely like someone who's like inhuman or doing something against humanity or something. So that makes sense. Let's go ahead and start with our top 5. We're going to start with our bottom 5, so the number 5 one. I guess I'll go first. My number 5 is a character from a short story collection, Mad Hallelujah. And the story is called Flowers of Flesh and Blood. And the monster is a mother who abuses her son. She has a horrible relationship with him. She doesn't care about him. She's a single mom. Not sure what happened to the dad, but her only joy in life are roses and pruning her roses and taking care of her garden. And this story is a body horror story. So something happens to her and she ends up turning into this very literal flower made of flesh and blood. And she just becomes this monster, this true monster. And it was very good and it was very scary and unsettling. I also really like monsters who are parents. They're always kind of like get to me a lot, those kind of situations. So I thought her character was really, really creepy, especially since she turned into the thing that she loved. But that was my number 5.
I'm intrigued. I'm interested. Right off the bat, as soon as you started explaining what it was about, I was like, hey, well, put that on the list.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And actually the Owen Morgan is one of the guys at Abominable Book Club.
Yeah, and Owen's usually the one that writes those little micro stories on the back of the... Yes, and he's got a talent for sure. Absolutely. Well, I'm intrigued. I'm putting that on the list. Thank you.
Awesome. Which one of you want to go next?
I can go next if you want, Felix.
I'm in the classroom. I would always just sit there until the teacher forced me to say something. So I'm usually going to volunteer to go last.
Merce, you might have to get a little forceful, make it happen, right?
Okay.
No putting your hands up. I tried to go with my list. I tried to go a little classic, traditional, and then a little more unique. So I started off with Frankenstein's monster, particularly by Mary Shelley. I'm trying to make sure I have it in screen here. I'm not going to go into details of what this is about because I'm sure all of you that is watching has already read this or seen a movie about it or know the whole story or aspect around it. But Mary Shelley's Frankenstein monster is one of my all-time favorite classics. Classics are hit and miss for me, but I do enjoy the horror classics, and this is definitely one of them. I do have multiple copies. This is one of my most recent purchases, or I purchased this one in the last year or so, and it's really, really beautiful, unique. And I don't know, something about piecing together a human being to try to make this perfect monster is just, it's very eerie, it's very creepy, but then the vulnerability and the sadness of the monster itself as they're going through the story is also really intriguing, and just, it's really saddening. So I don't know, this is my all-time favorite horror classic. So this is my number 5 pick.
Nice. So do you have a favorite film representation of Frankenstein that you like the best?
Oh, no, I don't know if I could pick just one or anyone in particular. I mean, book, there's lots of people that have done different styles of the story for book-wise, and I would still say Mary Shelley's is my favorite. But film, I don't know if I could pick my favorite adaptation of Frankenstein. It's Stuart, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I have the Frankenstein's monster from Penny Dreadful. Like, I really liked the way that he played the character. Like, he was the most human character out of all of them. Mm-hmm. Felix, number 5?
I've neither read or watched any Frankenstein movie or anything related to Frankenstein. And that sort of ties into my top 5 because I'm kind of going off the boards. I find it hard to get into traditional monsters. I feel like a lot of them are kind of antiquated and they aren't as scary as maybe they once were in the past. So I gravitate towards human monsters. So my 5th pick is just a generic sort of pick. It's Sloppy Scientist. So whenever the world goes sideways, there's always somebody that starts it. It's usually like Bill in biology who doesn't know what to do with his test tube and beakers, and all of a sudden the world ends up in a deadly plague or something like that. So my 5th one would be scientists that are playing around with nature and wind up harming humanity.
For number 4, my monster, this is my pathetic monster. There is a character in here, No One Gets Out Alive, and Adam Neville, whose name is Knacker. And he sort of runs this, I don't know, it's not really a hostel. It's like it's an apartment, but usually you rent apartments there when you're like really down on your luck. Kind of like a boarding house, I guess, maybe. And he runs it, and it's terrible, and it's disgusting, and it's gross. And this young woman comes to rent a room, and she has to deal with this guy, and he's like so gross and so disgusting, and he's constantly gaslighting her all the time. And, in real like kind of normal ways where he'll be like, oh no, you can't leave until you pay this fee. Or, oh no, you can't leave because you agreed to stay this amount of time. And then it starts getting more and more nefarious. But he's really, really pathetic because there's like another character who's kind of more aggressive in the book. And he's just always kind of bullying this other character. So I kind of like pathetic monsters because you feel bad for them sometimes. You kind of do, even though they probably deserve like everything they're getting. Like, you either want to like squish them like a bug or you want to help them in some way, And he was just such an awful character. It was so scary. Like, those type of subtle monsters to me are scarier because I feel like they're more common in society than like someone who's like full on like, is going to do something super terrible to you. They might just do these like little tiny things that are terrible to you all the time.
I remember you reviewing that one, and as soon as I saw that or heard your review, I was like, yes, that's going on the list too. What am I talking about, Merce? You sell me on everything you talk about on your channel. It goes on the list. Check.
Well, there's also a Netflix movie now for No One Gets Out Alive, and I hope it's good.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to check that out as well. Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to show my number 2. And again, it's not a classic, it's more traditional. And it is the vampires from I Am Legend. I do have the movie copy, which I actually received as a secondhand book from the Abominable Book Club, which was really exciting because I read this book a few years back and I didn't own a physical copy. But I do know that there's other copies out there that are absolutely gorgeous. But I don't know, something about, vampires, zombies, those traditional monsters. I do still love them, even though a lot of people saying, that they're kind of they're kind of dying off, or, you know, they were all last season, or however the young folks say it now. But I still really love them. And I think it's neat how a lot of people, especially with everything that's gone down over the last couple of years here, think that these are actually some sort of zombie. And I will be honest, I thought they were zombies at first as well, until I actually read the book and found out that they are actually a type of vampire. But they're not your usual type of vampire, which makes it that much more eerie to me. You know, they're not just kind of, I'm going to fly through your window at night and suck your blood. They do come out at night, but they can talk to you. They can try, they stay in numbers, and they stay close to their group, and they try to pull you out of your home and to find a way to try to get their hands on you. But at the same time, they have a scientist of sorts that's trying to find a way to cure them. So it's, I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people have seen I Am Legend and they know what the story is about, but I did really enjoy this type of vampire.
Did you see I don't know if it's the original film, but the one with Vincent Price?
No, I didn't see that one.
It's pretty cheesy, but I mean, it's right. So
sometimes cheesy's good. Sometimes cheesy's good. Sometimes it's not so good.
Yeah. When it's Vincent Price, I'm like, it's fine. You know, like I like his brand of cheesy.
Yes.
But sometimes I feel like the rest of the cast is just not the same type of cheesy. So it's just like, okay, you can't be like ironically and unironically cheesy. You have to be one or the other. You know?
Right.
Hoping to watch the Vincent Price movie this morning before this as part of my time-killing activities. But I wound up reading I Am Legend a few days ago, and then I watched the movie, the Will Smith movie, last night. And I watched it years ago, and I thought for sure those were zombies. And after reading the book, you really appreciate the story that that Richard Matheson was trying to tell. I think a lot of people have fallen out of favor with vampires, and I'm not sure if it's because the rules of the vampires have sort of bastardized or elaborated, and a lot of things can qualify as vampires now that didn't fall into the original Dracula. And I'm not sure why I'm going on a tangent about vampires. But anyways, I just finished reading the book and I loved it, and I just wanted to throw that in there. And I'm sure you're going to edit that out. So
I'm glad that you loved it. I'm glad that you loved it. And it's true, there's so many different types of vampires now. I mean, you even have your sparkly vampires, right? So this still stays on like the dark side of vampires, which I really love. You know, that light, fluffy thing may have been me like 15, 16 years ago, but now it's, no, I prefer the dark, the original, absolutely.
I realized that I didn't describe the book that I held up. I held up Stephen King's The Stand, and I just assumed everybody knows that story. Anyways, my fifth book was Sloppy Scientist, The Stand. There was a plague created by a scientist, and it ended up destroying most of the world. And that sort of ties into my my fourth monster, which is Mother Nature. Because when it's not a scientist that's unleashing a plague on the world, it's usually something caused by Mother Nature. So the fourth book that I would use as an example, or my second book that I would use as an example, is Children of Men, where there's a plague that is that comes out of nowhere and people aren't able to reproduce anymore. So there's a lot of things that you have to sort of deal with humanity that isn't going to continue. And it shows the nature of what we are when there's no future. So it's a pretty cool concept where there's this abstract monster of this disease that no one can explain, but it brings out the monstrous side of the people involved in the story.
Absolutely. Did you like the film too?
I thought it's one of the rare times where the book and the film were pretty much level with me. They're not the exact same story, but there's a lot of great stuff in both of them. So they were both really good.
The film I thought was pretty impressive, just like, you know, in a filming kind of way, because they did a lot of like one takes, you know, that seemed really impressive. Yeah. My number 3, speaking humans and monsters, are 2 characters in here. They are serial killers. And this is about an English serial killer who comes to New Orleans. He breaks out of jail, and he comes to New Orleans to just kind of basically find a new hunting ground. He is continuing on with his activities. He does meet another serial killer, and they they become like this very, they become soulmates in a way. But it's very dark and it's very intense. And AIDS does play one of the characters in this book as being another type of hunter, another type of serial killer in the gay community. So it's a very, it's a book that has a lot of humanity in it, but the two serial killers they are brutal. I mean, the descriptions of what they do to young men in this story is unforgettable. So serial killers are definitely up there in the whole entire monster realm. And I know that some people are like, oh, there's not that many serial killers today because, they all get caught. But there's also a lot of other data that's like, there's actually a lot of serial killers that are just getting pretty good at not being caught.
Exactly.
So it just seems really scary. And these two characters, you really kind of get into their head and like what they like about the things they're doing and how they feel when they're doing these things. And it's like, it really does almost feel like confessions or like you're in their mind. And so it's really disturbing.
That is some of the most terrifying monsters to me, is the realistic, real life horrors, people that actually exist. One of my favorite nonfiction books of all time is called Unthinkable, and it's about the 9 most extraordinary brains in the world. And it's so, like you said, it's so interesting. It's almost like an obsession, again, to know what these people are thinking, what's going through their minds, how could they possibly do those things to people and not feel any remorse of any sort. Speaking of which, that book I have heard all over and I've got it on my list. Again, another one I have to pick up because it sounds extremely intense, but yet so good.
It's really rough. It's like, I had to read it, like a couple chapters and I'd stop and then come back to it a few days later because it's a little too, it feels, it's not perverse in the sense where it's like, it's just a lot of sex and orgies and blood and stuff. It's just, it really gets under your skin, where you're just like, ugh. Yeah. So yeah, don't really want to stay that long.
You're saying be prepared, be ready if you jump into it.
Absolutely. And I just learned about this like German serial killer from like the, I don't remember what, it was like the 1900s or something, but he was called the Vampire of Dusseldorf. And he was like pretty nasty. Like he would like, drink his victims' blood, partially eat them. He would just randomly, like you were talking about, like you're just living your life and whatever. He would just randomly walk up to a woman and just knock her out and then, do these horrible things to her. Yeah. And then so when he was finally caught, and he has this whole horrible backstory, you should read it on Wiki. It's just so intense. But anyway, when he finally gets his head cut off, he's executed. He tells the executioner, and he's like, how long, he says something like, do you think that I will be able to hear the blood, leaving my neck, like when you cut off my head? Because that would be the most, I think he called it like exquisite or wonderful or delicious thing ever or something. That was just like, okay.
So he was even fascinated by his own torment. That's just...
Yeah, he was gone. You know what I mean? Gone.
Yeah.
Like, if he had a soul, it was obliterated really early on in his life, which he had a pretty rough beginning, but it was just like...
So how do you feel about the popularization of serial killers? Like, they basically have fan clubs now. So how do you feel about when you see people sort of glorifying what these people have done?
Yeah, it feels gross. I mean, it's like, even I had to like rectify like my own behavior, I think, with like I was for most of my life, I was always really fascinated with serial killers. I think Jack the Ripper was the first serial killer that I ever heard about. And I was always morbidly fascinated, and Ted Bundy, everyone's like, oh, he's so hot, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, no, he's not. He's not. And like, just you saying that, it just makes it clear that you don't even care about the victims, and like you don't even care what his behavior was about, because his behavior, I'm sorry, just completely nullifies his looks and his hair, like whatever it was that you guys think is so cool about him. Like it's one thing to like acknowledge that these serial killers exist and to kind of like, read about them.
Or you have like all these TikTokers that are doing these like POVs or whatever where they're pretending to be Bundy. And then all the girls in the comments are, oh my God, you're so hot. You're so hot. And I'm like, listen here. Yes.
What? Are you serious?
Absolutely. Yes. And then, or they're trying to play out some type of serial killer. And all the girls are in the comments are like, oh my gosh, you're so hot. You realize that you're acting out a person that really did these awful things. There's still families that mourn over the people they lost because of this. People's lives were changed. Like this is not sexy in any way.
Like, I mean, I get why people are attracted to death, because it's like, it is attractive. I think it's attractive to most people because it's scary and it's final. A lot of people are wondering, why do women love true crime so much? Some people were saying, well, it's because women, it's knowledge, it's like information for them to be aware, to like know about whatever. And like, maybe that is, do I take extra time to find out who's walking behind me? Yeah, I do. But
isn't it funny? I don't know about you or either of you guys, but I will be walking down the street and I'll be doing the same thing, looking over the shoulder, and then I'll think, I'm probably making the person behind me feel awful because they're probably just doing their thing, going their way. And here I'm seeming all paranoid. Who's going to want to attack me? Nobody's going to want to attack me. I'm good. Right. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, don't let your guard down. Don't feel bad. The typical Canadian, don't feel bad to make other people feel uncomfortable. But knowing that it's making you uncomfortable, but you don't want to hurt their feelings. I sit there and I'm thinking to myself, you're being over paranoid. You're thinking too much into this. You're probably hurting the people's feelings behind you. Meanwhile, it's probably going to be my niceness or my, brush off that's going to end up putting me in a troublesome situation because I don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings when really I should be focused on me and how I feel in this situation and only me, because I'm the only person that's going to protect myself, right?
I feel bad for women, especially like just that constant worry that somebody could just jump out and overpower you and grab you and take you somewhere. Like I'm a pretty, like I can handle myself, but I don't let people walk behind me. And if I'm on public transit, I try not to let people sit behind me. It's very paranoid. And what happened was I was watching the news. And this is why I don't watch the news anymore. And there was a story about a guy who was sitting on a Greyhound bus and he was minding his own business. Somebody that was sitting behind him just decapitated him. I didn't know how to draw that out. Yeah,
I heard about that.
Yes, that happened in Winnipeg, right?
Yes, in Winnipeg, exactly. And it's just like, since I read that story, and because I know things happen and just random stuff has happened to me in my life, I try not to let people walk behind me, and I'm always vigilant no matter where I am, even though I know I can handle myself in most situations.
Okay, is it my turn now? I'm sorry, I was enjoying that conversation.
Where were we? Number 3.
Number 3, okay. All right, so my number 3 pick, again, is kind of more of a traditional monster. It happens to be one of my favorite monsters, is zombies. So this particular book by S.G. Brown is called Breathers. This is a rom-com. So it's a zombie romance comedy. So it's a little more lighthearted. Your main character, Andy, has become a zombie. He's living at home. His parents are not zombies. I don't want to go too much into the story and ruin it because I don't know how many people have actually read this book before because I don't see it around very often. But it gets hilarious. There is some romance. It's a little kind of disgusting because it's 2 zombies. So it's a little odd. There's a lot of humor in this. And it's one of my all-time favorite zombie books because it's so weird and out of this world. But Andy meets up with a group of fellow zombies and they almost have like AA for zombies. Meeting together once a week or once a month kind of thing. And they become buddies. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So if anyone's interested in reading this dark, funny, weird rom-com, they can. But again, zombies are some of my favorite monsters still. And everyone says that zombies are dying off or their last season or, and I'm thinking, no, I still love zombies. Because again, if something was to ever happen and we did have, corpses that were walking around eating people, it would catch us off guard. We wouldn't be expecting it. We'd be getting into our car again, and then we would get attacked, and that's gonna be
like,
it,
oh,
right?
I'm not gonna run away from that zombie because I'm gonna hurt his feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Some weird thing staggering to you, like trying to eat you, and you're like, listen, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm not gonna run. I'm just gonna get eaten.
I'm not even sure if I should tell this story, but when the pandemic first started, I was going for walks all the time. I still do. And I was walking and the street was desolate. And all of a sudden there was somebody that was crossing the street toward me, just lurching, just dragging his leg behind him. And I'm like, you know what? I've been waiting for this. I'm ready. And I'm like, if this goes down, if this is a zombie, I'm ready and I'm going to handle this. And it turned out it was just a kid who was taking his time crossing the road. But everything was super heightened back then. But I was ready. And that ties into an answer of a question that we're gonna tackle later, and how I feel about zombies in general. I know you said that you love them, Nikki. They're my least favorite of the horror.
How dare you?
But I'll explain that later.
I can't even fight you on that because you're the professional when it comes to monsters. There's no pressure or anything.
I like funny zombies,
yes.
Comedic zombies. That's the kind of zombies that I like.
I don't have a book accompaniment, and this made me realize a lot of things about the monster and the genre I'm going to talk about. It's haunted houses. And like haunted house stories are blowing up right now. And I've never really, I can't take most haunted house stories and situations seriously, because like I figure if I was like a main character in a haunted house story, there wouldn't be a chapter 2. I would walk in, the ghost would warn me a couple times, and I would walk out. It would be microfiction. So basically, my issue with haunted house stories is that ghosts get the bad rap. Because a ghost is just trying to live its best afterlife. It's lounging in its home. This is its territory. And then families every few years come in and the ghost will warn you about 3,700 times, I'm in here, please leave. And they never leave. So the real monster in that situation is whoever is steering these people towards these haunted houses. So there's got to be a jackass real estate agent that's just feeding people to ghosts, and that's the real monster. And the insurance companies can you imagine the premium of insurance on a haunted house? They know what's going on, and they're just feeding people to these houses. So my monster in that situation is whoever is directing people to all of these haunted houses. And to be clear, there are like cool ghost stories that I've enjoyed, like more vengeful ghosts. Like if I were to die, I have a list of people I'm gonna haunt and I'll never let them go. So it doesn't matter which house they go to, I'm gonna follow them. And those are the sort of ghosts that I'm interested in. But when you're like set in a location that you can easily leave, it's very difficult for me to suspend my disbelief.
But I think like because it's such a difficult trope, I guess, I think that's why it's so exciting when it's like kind of cool, it's so hard.
But I think ghosts are great as well for, like younger. Because I don't know about you, but as a child, I loved being scared. And one of the best things in the world was sitting around the campfire or something and telling those ghost stories, those things that would linger forever. But like you said, things fall around my house all the time. And my mind doesn't go to ghosts. It goes to, oh, great. What did the dog get into? Or what did the cat get into? Or funny how you watch all these, like ghost hunters or these movies and there's a creak in the house. And the first thing they go to is, it's a ghost. When I would naturally go to, oh, my house is settling. Or, oh, that's the laundry on downstairs. Or whatever.
It could be so many things. Like I want it to be a ghost, but it's really going to have to do something spectacular for me to be like, oh, wow, that was definitely a ghost, not just some
like
shadow, or
manifest right in front of you and start talking to you or something.
Yeah. Like in some of the movies where it's like a sheet will fly up and it's like the shape of a person or something. That'll work. I'll take that.
That makes me think of something I was just discussing with somebody recently about the fascination with haunted house stories and ghost stories and all that. do you think the reason, because you just said, I would be glad to see a ghost. So do you think the reason that people are fascinated with haunted houses is because they want some sort of proof that there is an afterlife, that there is something more than what we're dealing with right now?
Yeah, probably. I mean, like for myself, I don't really believe there isn't anything. Like I don't believe really in an afterlife. I mean, I'm open to there being something there, but I don't really have a belief. Like I feel like when I die, it's just, that's it. So yeah, it would make me feel a ton better to know that an aspect of my ego or my soul or whatever you want to call it is going to exist somewhere else.
And horrify everyone else around you and haunt them and torment them.
Yes, I want to be in that dimension, that ghost dimension. I want to be there.
I think the same thing. When you're gone, you're gone. When you're dead, you're dead. The only people that are going to remember you are your loved ones that are left behind. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2. Let's see. Maggie's Grave is a really great book about a witch who comes back from the dead. But this witch character is more of a mix of, if you can imagine like one of the aliens from Alien, very horrible looking witch character, like kind of combined into one thing, that would be Maggie. She comes back to exert her revenge or whatever, and she literally just, I mean, she's like ripping genitals apart, or I guess maybe like a typical monster. Like she's used to be human, she comes back, she's transformed into something completely inhuman, and she's created this way through magic of some sort. So I think like sometimes when I think about monsters, I also think about fairy tales. So she's definitely sort of like a fairy tale character to me, the witch who, things happen and she comes back and she does her stuff. So I really liked her character in this, and she's unforgiving and relentless, and she's brutal, and I really loved it.
And David's a fantastic writer.
Review on that one, and you made it seem like a really amazing book. I'm gonna have to grab it one day.
It's good. It's a lot of mayhem, and it's nice because like sometimes what I don't like is when they take the monster character or whatever antagonist or something, and they try to turn it into like a good guy or something, like everything's gonna come out okay, and then they kind of come back to humanity or something like that. And I really like the books where it's like they just stay who they are, like whatever their nature is, they stay on that track of their nature. And I like that, and that's really what I felt with Maggie. Was like, this is her nature now, and this is what she's gonna do, and you can't stop her.
Revenge.
Yeah. Revenge.
All of the revenge. And I haven't read any of David's work, but I've only heard like fantastic things. I've got all of his stuff on my list to read, so he sounds like he's a really good storyteller. All right. Well, geez, I keep knocking it. I'm sorry, you guys. I don't do this ever. When I'm doing my live shows, ever do I knock my thing. But like I'm sitting here with you guys chatting, and I keep knocking it. Okay, my second pick, I think I really kind of stretched it a little bit. Maybe you guys won't think so. But I picked Krampus. Now, if you guys don't know, Merce did a whole video on Krampus. I loved it. Not only was the editing and filming and the style and the looks and everything on point, but I love the detail that you gave for the history on Krampus. That's what really intrigues me. I read Brahms' version of Krampus a couple years ago, and then I read it again this past December, and I'm going to read it again this December. I think it's fascinating. I think it's interesting. I think it's incredible. I think that this version is really neat, how there's times where you actually feel bad for Krampus and his minions, his awful, awful devil minions. But I think the history, and I'm not going to go into all the history. If you want the history, go and watch Merce's video on it, because she did a fantastic job, or go and research it for yourself, because we're not going to sit here for hours discussing Krampus. But I think the history behind him, and taking such a fluffy, lighthearted, season that people love and turning it dark, is what intrigues me a lot about Krampus. I was fighting if it was going to be my first pick, but my first pick is kind of out of this world.
And what about you, Felix? What's your next book or character?
My next monster is something that Nichi already talked about. It's the vampire. But there's a caveat. It has to be the traditional vampire.
I see.
So
Dracula.
what I really, really appreciate about Dracula is that there are rules, right? And that made me sound so structured. But there are rules. And by the way, I don't really love this book, but I have 5 copies of it for some reason. But there are rules, and I love when a vampire, like a newer vampire story, tries to figure out what those rules are and how they play into the vampires in modern times. So with this one in Fever Dream, George R.R. Martin really tries to break down the science behind vampires. So he dismisses some of the rules that Bram Stoker brought in, and he's trying to figure out what would really make a creature that is somewhat human live as long as it has, and what's the science behind it. So it's really fascinating how he tried to sort of undercut some of the rules while still sticking to the traditional vampire and trying to make sense of it scientifically. And you see some of that in the book I Am Legend as well. There's a real scientific approach to trying to figure out what these vampires are. But then, as I mentioned before, vampires now are kind of like people, they're just walking around in the daytime doing whatever they want, shining and sparkling, and they're not really vampires anymore. So yeah, I wish things were back the way they used to. Vampires.
So why didn't you particularly love Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Because I don't necessarily think Dracula was the bad guy in the story. I know he did a lot of like dickish things. I don't know if I could say that. But Van Helsing, no good guy talks that much. And Van Helsing was just talking the entire book. And it's like, you could have saved a lot of lives, Van Helsing, if you could just chill and do what you were brought from Amsterdam to do, right? So there was a lot about the characters in the book and the repetition of the book that I didn't like, but I loved the first third of it, where it was like in Dracula's castle, in around the city, how the people react to Dracula, the lore, the rules, all of that stuff. And then Van Helsing showed up, and
I was going to say, isn't it funny how we keep going back to how we're talking about these monsters in these stories, but it ends up not really being the monsters itself that are the true monsters. It ends up being some type of human in the story that's really causing the ruckus. That's interesting. Maybe we need to think about ourselves here. Forget all the monsters in the world.
We have so much potential for monsterness.
And that's why, honestly, I'm much more fascinated by like human monsters and psychological monsters. And that's what I write about for the most part, because you could be sitting on a bus one day and somebody could decapitate you. And you want to know why, like what makes that person, like you were saying about serial killers, what makes these people behave the way that they do. And that's really fascinating to me, much more so than the standard supernatural monster.
Do you think it's fascinating?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you feel like it's something that is possible that anyone could kind of fall into?
For sure. And it's like with the way that I don't want to say the way that I was raised, because I was raised by a good family. I have wonderful parents, but I wasn't in a great location for a lot of my life. And I met a lot of people who I love and who would do anything for me and who were genuinely, to me, in my own eyes, great people. But if you don't know them, and if you happen to be in the wrong place, they're not going to be nice to you. I've met people that other people would consider to be monsters that are wonderful people to me. So there's always that balance between not just if you can be a monster and if you aren't a monster, but knowing that you can be a monster and sort of deciding who you dole out that monstrosity to.
Okay, so my number one monster is Pennywise from It. And I love evil clowns. I think there's something really brilliant about clowns. Like, they're an ancient kind of art form. They are something that's sort of like the trickster character. And when they go dark, it's like so weird and creepy because they are kind of funny and they seem playful, but they actually have no good intentions. So I think Pennywise has just always been this character, like even when I was a little kid and I would just see the original It film version. Can't remember anything today. What's his name? You guys know his name. He's the original Pennywise.
Is it Tim something?
Tim.
Because everybody knows this guy and they love him, and I can't remember.
Yes.
Either.
It's not Tim Burton. It's.
I want to say a C. A last name starts with a C, but I could be wrong too. But yeah, we know who you're talking about.
Okay. Even his clown, which is like, there's nothing really that freaky about his clown makeup or anything. Like, it's kind of real common. Just his teeth, right? Like, I think. But even then, like, it's just so like frightening, but interesting and enthralling and exciting at the same time. Clowns are so archaic. Like, why do they still exist? You know, it's like nobody likes clowns from what I, hear, like in the sense of like having a clown be there and everyone's like, yay, clowns. No one ever says that, right? So it's like, why do they still exist? They're so like archaic, but they're still here. And it's so weird and interesting to me.
I remember this one time when I was growing up, I was at a friend's birthday party, and I think she was turning 7 or 8. And we were having the birthday outside, and we're at this beautiful park that I grew up by that's kind of very forest-like at the same time around a man-made lake. And her parents had hired a clown, and the clown thought his entrance was going to be hiding behind trees and then running to another tree and hiding behind that one and kind of peeking it around at all the kids. It was very creepy. It was unusual. It was probably not the best, like, I'm here, I'm nice, I'm a happy clown, I'm here to enjoy your party with you. It was very creeper-ish. So let me just tell you, my friend was just screaming at the top of her lungs the closer he would get. He was not wanted at the party, and her parents were just mortified because he had spent all this money for this clown. And the poor clown was just trying to be fun and playful. Oh, it's a memory I will never forget because it was quite the scene, but
yeah, I feel like if you put clown makeup on, I feel like there is no way for you not to go into clown mode. Like, I feel like there's no way that you can't, right? Because you put the costume on. It's like sometimes I'll do like these elaborate makeups or whatever, but it's not until I put the contacts in where I'm like, oh, hello. And it's like I completely change, and like whatever I feel like the character wants, like I'll do it, like, just be running around the apartment doing dumb stuff. But like, it's like I feel like if you put clown makeup on, there's no way that you wouldn't act like, you wouldn't automatically just start acting like a clown. I want to test that theory on somebody. There's actually a movie that somebody sent me a link to, a trailer for a movie called Clown, I think. And it's about this guy who puts on clown makeup, but he then actually starts the nose and the hair and all of the stuffs like start fusing with his body, and he starts actually becoming a clown. Oh. I was like, I'm gonna watch that.
Yeah. I want to watch that now too. That sounds really good. That would be creepy. That would be terrifying.
It looks really creepy, actually. I was like, okay, all right, I'll watch that. Yeah, Terrifier was actually really scary too. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, that one's real. That's really gory. Like, really, really gory. Like, he saws someone in half. Like, and it's not what you're thinking. It's not like, oh, they're laying on the table and they come in with the saw. That's not the
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I was like,
direction it was going.
How is she reading our minds?
Because that's what it was awful, but it was really good because the clown was extraordinarily scary. All right, Nichi, number 1.
Okay. I almost said my number 2 pick. Okay, my number 1 pick is a little more out of this world. This is where I kind of went a little more unique. I know that this is not a book that's really well known or that a lot of people have read, but it's something that I talk about quite often on my channel, on my Bookstagram, on my Twitter. I love the author. He's a fantastic human being all around, and I love his work. So I picked Cannibal Nuns from Outer Space.
Nice.
By Duncan P. Bradshaw, because these nuns are out of this world. And I'll see if I can scoot it closer. But the nuns are not just, like nuns from outer space. If you see I'm trying to point there. If you see their throat, it almost like opens up and has kind of like a Spawn look to it, you know, like this tongue and teeth are coming out. So in this story, you're following your main character. His name is Father Flynn. And even though he is religious and he's a father, he's not your typical type. He's very blunt, he's very dark, he's very gruesome, and there's a lot of vulgar in this story, so you have to have a good sense of humor if you're going to jump into this one, because it is dark, it is gory. The monsters, the cannibal nuns from outer space, are brilliant. They're everything. But Father Flynn himself is hilarious. All of the supporting characters are fantastic. So yeah, I went with something a little more unique on this story. So basically, Father Flynn is trying to catch these cannibal nuns from outer space that are going around killing a bunch of people and trying to take humans on as their minions. And yeah, it's a really, really, really fun story.
That's awesome.
It's a really fun story. Yeah.
I really like that. I mean, I think nuns are really scary, actually. Like, when I was a kid, I used to have this weird lingering hallucination. Like, it was a waking hallucination that I would have for it was like a week. And I had this hallucination that there were these nun habits underneath my covers, and they had no faces. They were just nun habits, and they were floating. And I kept having this hallucination, for I think it was 3 days in a row. And it was really horrifying because I would be over the covers, and in the dark I could see it, and I'd be like, oh, I'll go under the covers, but they'd be under the covers, and it was just really scary. So nuns to me are always freaky.
They still are. The costumes and everything, the way they hold themselves, they're very calm, very collected. But yeah, no, they are. They're very eerie, very creepy.
Yeah. And
so
also,
that's
too,
why.
Did you hear about all of those nuns in Ireland? There was this home for women, young women, that was run by nuns, in from the 1930s to the 1960s or something. And they would take these women's babies and adopt them out. But some of them, there was a whole, they unearthed a huge grave of babies and children and stuff. So there's been this huge investigation, but the women were talking about the nuns and how awful they were and all this stuff, and it was truly evil, dude. Really evil. And I was
well, now you guys need to go out and read Cannibal Nuns from Outer Space by Duncan P. Bradshaw, especially after hearing that. That is horrifying. I did hear something about that at first when you were talking about it. I thought it was maybe something more recent. I thought, no, I didn't hear about that, but I didn't hear that much detail. So
yeah, because they were doing some excavating for some type of functional purpose. I don't know, they were replacing a pipe or something, and then they just found all of these skeletons or something.
Remains, and oh my goodness, that's horrifying.
Yeah, it was
really
See?
People,
it kind of sounds similar to what is happening in Canada with the residential schools. Yeah. And that has to do with the church as well. It's pretty messed up. The most monstrous types of people are the people that impact children. When I hear stories like this, it bugs me. And it's part of why I write the things that I write. But it also ties into my number one choice, which is also.
Oh, look at this.
We're monster twins.
Almost. You went with Pennywise. Mm-hmm. I'm going with Bad Parents. Because this whole book is about terrible parents. Yeah. Right at the beginning, Georgie, where were his legal guardians? If somebody had just said, stranger danger, Georgie, don't put your arm in that sewer, we would avoid a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
And the kids played around, kids did stuff, but if they had better parents, I don't think they would have done those unspeakable things that they wound up doing in the sewer. So that's why I'm going with Bad Parents. Excuse me, Bad Parents for it.
Also, too, there's another parent who's pretty sexually abusive, I think, right?
I think, was it Beverly's dad?
Yeah, Beverly's
Yeah,
dad.
he was probably the worst like fictional father that I've read. Stephen King did a good, if not like a little bit over the top job of creating that character, because he was really, really well done in a grotesque sort of way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How important is humanity in the creation of monsters in fiction?
I think the monsters that are most compelling have the most to do with humanity. So, for instance, you can have a monster that's just marauding and killing people, and while you can make fun fiction out of that, it's not anything that lasts. I think the reason that the traditional monsters that we have lasted so long is because there's a human element to them that people can relate to. So, for example, the werewolf, that's a monster that spanned over centuries. And I think simply it's the struggle that people can identify with of having no choice but to do something that you don't want to do, to become a monster, literally, and then reverting to your humanity and then having to deal with what you did as a monster. Another example would be the ghost. Ghosts are always depicted as roving, as having unfinished business, not knowing why they're haunting the people that they're haunting. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, other than the haunting part. They can relate to not having finished business, to not knowing what they're doing, to roving around and feeling lost like most ghosts do. So I think that's a very compelling part of the ghost lore. And the other example would be vampires, where vampires, I think, are probably the coolest of the monsters. And I think part of that reason is because there's something very human about vampires. They look like humans. They have the same human temptations. You'll often see vampires who are supposed to treat humans like cattle, falling in love with them or trying to befriend them, because there's that human element there. And I think that's what makes vampires and other traditional monsters so relatable. And I think that's why they have the staying power that they do. Great
answer. Nichi, Plagued by Visions asks, does your family also love horror, or is it a lonely struggle?
No, everyone in my house, we were actually just talking about this not too long ago, Merce and I, everyone in my house has some type of fascination with horror, or like to be scared, or enjoy horror movies, or sitting around the campfire, talking or telling those, spooky ghost stories. So luckily in my household, we all enjoy getting scared or being scared, or that dark atmosphere. So luckily we all enjoy it, and I am not lonely. I'm not on my own. Nobody's looking at me weird thinking, why do you like all the dark stuff?
You're lucky. Like, my boyfriend doesn't like horror. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand why I like it. He respects that I like it, but he's just like, it doesn't do anything for me. I don't get it. Halloween,
That's why you have all of us.
Yeah, I know. If you had to live through a horror story, what type would you want it to be? Slasher, paranormal, thriller, etc.?
100% a zombie story.
Really?
Yeah, because if you give me a good pair of sneakers, you give me my insoles because my feet, they're a little flat. Sneakers, insoles, a pistol, a samurai sword, and I'm surviving the zombie apocalypse every single time, or 9 out of 10 times. Because zombies, this is what I mean. I can't take them seriously. They're slow. There's nothing really to them, and if you hide out for long enough, they'll pass. So there's just nothing that I find really intimidating about zombies. They're slow humans that are a little dead. So there's nothing really about a zombie situation that would, like I said, I thought I saw one. I was ready. I didn't run away. I was ready. There's nothing about a sort of zombie apocalypse situation that really bothers me. But this has to be, again, I guess I like rules. This has to be traditional zombies, the slow-moving zombies. Whatever they're doing now, like with Army of the Dead, where all of a sudden zombies are gymnasts and doing parkour. Like, those aren't the zombies that I'm talking about. Those are a different creature entirely. But traditional zombies, I have no worries about.
Okay, so a slasher movie, you don't think you'd survive, like, in that situation?
I think I could, because a lot of times people in slasher movies are dumbasses. And like you said, they could just they could do so many things to prevent those situations. But it's almost as if they're looking to be murdered. So I think I do okay in a slasher situation as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they want it to happen. They're waiting. They're like, listen, it's my time. All right, it's coming after me now.
Which horror novel unsettled you the most?
I thought really hard about this one. I actually also talked to Felix about this a little bit. I don't have a specific book. I guess I could say there is one that was written by a Canadian author. Her name is Kelly Sharon. It's called Pretty Wicked, and it is about a young girl who has a detective as a father, and throughout her whole entire childhood, she was planning out the perfect murder. And at a very young age, she committed a whoopsie murder and then started planning out murders after that. And I think this kind of falls into what we discussed earlier about serial killers and, you know, those real life people that are out there doing these awful, awful things. I think that's what resonated with me the most, because let me tell you, after I read this book by Kelly Sharon, there was times where, you know, like closets were spoken about, windows, and I would have to go around my house before I went to bed, make sure nobody was in the closets, make sure the windows were properly locked. And I think Merce also mentioned something as we were talking about how it's almost like you're reading their confessions. When I was reading Pretty Wicked by Kelly Sharon, it was almost like I was reading Kelly Sharon's, her own stories of things that she had done in her past, that sort of thing, her own confessions, because she was just spot on with the details. So I think that would probably be the book that I would have to pick. Anything that is, you know, true crime or serial killers or that realistic horror gets me the worst.
Where do you get inspiration for your books from?
Inspiration is basically everywhere. Just my experiences a lot of the time. Sometimes I don't even have to use my imagination. I've seen a lot of crazy things, and part of what makes writing awesome is that you can channel all of the negatives that you've seen and put it towards literally something positive. So a lot of my inspiration just comes from life experiences or just random occurrences. Like I was running the other day and a dandelion spore flew into my eye. 3 weeks later, I had a novella, and that'll be out in April. But like just random things where my imagination always goes to like the worst possible scenario. So a lot of my ideas come from just worry in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question though about how to make a monster?
Sure.
Okay. So you know that I really love that red is the most ravishing color. I think is that the name of it?
The Loveliest Shade of Red.
The Loveliest Shade of Red. So I love that story. It is like just, to me, it's like a very complex story that has so much like psychology and like just kind of like humanity mixed into it. I really don't know how you did it, but I wonder how did you like come up with the idea of Rob? Sort
of a long story. So you see that my room is red. You asked me about it earlier on, but I was so nervous that I just kind of spaced out. So I wrote a book called Red Room years ago. I haven't done anything with it. So I paint my room red so that that I know that everything that I'm writing is focused towards that book. And she was an element of that book. And basically, I just needed somebody to torture men. And that was what came to my mind. So I had her in the book as more of a monster without any depth. And when I realized that book wasn't really going to work in the way that it was presented, I realized I needed a backstory for this creature, for why she became the way that she did. And I just tried to think about things that would logically turn somebody into like a man-hating Gorgon, basically. And a lot of Ravina's backstory, a lot of her life are things that I've seen, people I've grown up around. I was a youth worker. I've been around the foster care system. So you see a lot of awful things in real life. And I tried to think of how somebody going through all of that would respond. And if they could do something about it, I don't want to spoil the story, but if they can do something about it when everything seems to be over, what would they do? How would they be? And I wanted to kind of make that creature, and I came up with Ravina.
I think like the thing that I like about her is her backstory. You know, it's like this, it was just this like tapestry, you know, where it's like you felt bad for her, but you were sort of repulsed also because her behavior was so bad. But there's so much in her that also I could relate to, you know. I was in the foster care system for a while, so, you know, that kind of related to me a little bit. And so like I knew girls like that with some of those behaviors, you know. So it's just like I could relate to a lot of her, and like kind of, you know, just seeing her journey through the story was like, it was wild. It was so good. And I think she does show up again later, right, in the book? Like,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I was like, when I noticed it, I was like, oh, look who's back. That was like really exciting, and I really enjoyed that whole thing that happened there.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's the reaction that I was hoping for, because it was either people are going to get tired of her and not want to see her anymore, or people are going to be excited to see her again. And it's not the last time you're going to see her. So I hope that reaction stays the next time you see her.
Awesome. Do you believe in ghosts? This is a good question.
It's a hard question to answer, but it is a really good question. It's a fun question. I'm going to say no. I want to believe that there's something, you know, different out there in another universe, or there is something haunting us or creeping around. Or, I mean, the thought of somebody always being in the room watching you is kind of creepy. So I want to believe those things. And we kind of touched on that earlier in our talks about our top picks. So I want to believe there is, but I haven't had something like an experience that was so, you know, like solid that it solidified my whole thought on the, you know, the thought of ghosts or spirits being around us. I'm going to say I'm on the fence, but I'm more of a no, unless something like really solidifies that it's true. I have that experience that changes my whole thought process for sure.
You've experienced hardship, death, and discrimination. Does writing horror help you cope with human darkness? But can 100%. I say something to that really quickly? You don't write really like just horror though, right? I mean,
no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I try to write. I don't want to be classified as just a horror author, because no one wants to be pigeonholed as just being one thing. But my main, even if I'm not writing horror, like most of my work is going to be dark fiction. So the things that I often write, like if you were to read you did read How to Make a Monster from the beginning to the end, there, like a lot of that is just stuff from my life that I'm dealing with. And a lot of those stories that I wrote them when I didn't even realize I wanted to be an author. It was just, I have this idea for a story. I need to get this out of me, and I need to figure out a way to cope with what I'm going through. And even now, I can firmly say that if I didn't go through all of the things that I went through, I wouldn't be writing. And if I wasn't writing, I don't think I would have survived everything that I went through. So even now, like I've mostly been a hermit during the pandemic, and a lot of people ask me how I deal with things. And although I do like to deal with things straight on and handle conflicts, when things are becoming overwhelming and people are doing things and life is out of control, I can escape to like 7 different places that all live inside my head. And it gives me a chance to take a break from the cruelties of the world, and I guess create my own cruelties for some reason. But just focus my energy on something that I know will give people a little bit of entertainment and will give me a bit of relief.
I'm just so glad that you guys have decided to do this with me. I feel kind of a little bit like a fish out of water, because I'm not really used to like hosting and talking like this and so much. I'm usually just talking to the camera. But I'm so glad that you guys decided that it would be cool enough for you guys to come and join me on this. It's like the first show. And I'm just so really grateful. And you know, Felix, I've been trying to drag you into doing something for so long. And when you said yes, I was like, what? I was like, oh my God. I was like already prepared for you to be like, no. When you said yes, I was like,
literally the furthest out of my comfort zone I've been in a long time. So it was sort of a thing where I figure I have to get out of my comfort zone, right? And I have to, if I'm going to do this seriously, which I am, I have to be open to this sort of thing, and I can't be worried about the things that I'm worried about. I don't even post, like, this is the first time a lot of people are going to see what my face like looks like.
Yeah.
And which worries me, because generally I don't know what to do with my face. So it's very uncomfortable for me to have people looking at me. And I'm going to stop talking now so people can stop looking at me. But thank you for having me. And I appreciate being here. Two things before we go. Tim Curry was the name.
Yes, Tim Curry.
Yes.
Tim Curry.
So it is a C. Okay.
It is a C. So we were on the right path. There's going to be people that are just upset that we didn't know the name.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I really enjoyed this. I hope that whoever is watching this also really likes it. It was really fun to hear the top 5 stuff because you guys had really interesting, like, examples of monsters that, like, I didn't even think of. So it was really, really cool. So thank you so much for agreeing to join me on this little journey of top 5.